The Georgia Bulldogs, they overcome Texas 30-15. They never trail in this game. It was one where they jumped out to a lead in that first half, and then it never went away, really. There was one moment there in the third quarter where Texas scores all 15 of its points. If they throw the interception and trash is coming out onto the field, and it felt like it could be a turning point in that game, and it was into Georgia's favor. Texas does score. They cut it to one score. And Georgia fans all over America are starting to shake in their boots again. But it wasn't meant to be. Texas ends up failing its first test. They lose by 2 scores at home. Plus, I think they might have let the I don't know, the what is it? The cat out of the bag. What expression do you want to use? The toothpaste is out of the tube. Quinn Ewers was benched at the end of the first half. Arch Manning comes in. Quinn Ewers then comes back in the second half. But Manning didn't look so great. Quinn Ewers didn't look so great, but Quinn did look a little bit more prepared than Arch Manning did. But that's got to start. We got to start there because I feel like that needs to be the discussion point from this game. Is Texas in the midst of a quarterback controversy, Abe? What do you say?
Oh, first off, I disagree that that's the discussion point. And no, they're not in the midst of the quarterback controversy.
Okay.
Arch Manning comes in and immediately turns it over. So you can miss me with that 100%. This wasn't about Texas, man. And in your open, you hesitated to use the word dominate or manhandle. Don't. Like it should have been way worse if we're going to be honest. Like this was a Georgia team that still didn't play its best, but they played a lot better than what they had showed up to this point this year. 7 sacks, 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles on defense. They absolutely manhandled an offense from Texas that had been humming. And I had questions about that. I had questions going into the game about Quinn Ewers and if they could challenge you deep, and because that's not what they did against Oklahoma the week before. But we hadn't seen this Georgia. This Georgia defensive front hadn't shown up against Auburn or Mississippi State or Alabama or any of the other teams. If they would have shown up in the manner that they did, they would have beaten Alabama. This was a completely different Georgia team. And Garrett, the scary part about it, they didn't even necessarily play that good of a game on offense. You're talking about 3 interceptions. The receivers still continue to drop passes. Some of those cost Carson Beck interceptions. They certainly weren't all on him.
No.
This is a game that very easily could have been 45-15. And I almost view it from that lens in terms of the domination. That's how good I thought Georgia was. And it's just another statement to me that if Georgia does put it together on both sides of the ball, because they put it together on defense, I don't think you can argue against that. If they actually put it together on offense along with the defensive effort, they're going to win the national championship. Like there's just no team. I'm convinced after what we saw, there's just no team that can do what they can do on both ends, on both sides of the ball, if they're playing at their best. Now, the question is, in the big games when it matters, will they play at their best on both sides of the ball? This, though, to me, was about Georgia. Now we get to Texas, because we had every question we asked of Texas, kind of, as you pointed out, they had a spotlight shown on them. The defense, it just isn't as good as the numbers say. Not a huge surprise. The offensive line had problems. Not a huge surprise. It's just not a big play offense. They can't run the ball with any consistency. None of those are surprises. They've been hidden because of the quality of offenses that they faced, right? But then they go up against a Georgia offense that can move the ball, a Georgia defense that can run with their receivers and deal with their offensive linemen. And there wasn't much for Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning to do. They were under assault immediately. The one-on-one wins for the Georgia defensive line, that's not on Quinn Ewers. The Texas O-line just could not deal with it. And so I do think you have to start asking some questions. The good news for Texas is they have a pretty manageable schedule. And so while this is certainly a setback for them, it really doesn't change the scope of what this season could be. Potentially setting up a massive end of the season, regular season game with Texas A&M, which we certainly got to look forward to. And it depends, obviously, what A&M does between now and then. They got some tough games. Same thing for Texas. But This to me is much more about what Georgia was able to do than what Texas was not able to do. But I do agree with you. Texas is not just going to run through the SEC schedule at this point. I think that's been shown.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. I mean, let's talk about winners first. I think that's actually a really good point. I respect that thought. So, and maybe I mean, look, this was exactly what we thought was going to happen with Texas. Well, it was exactly what we were worried would happen with
Right.
Texas. It's not that we thought it was going to happen. We thought it was going to happen. But look, this is a Texas team that's good. This is a really good football team. It's just they hadn't played a team of their ilk. And that became very clear very early in this game. Georgia, on the other end of the spectrum, has faced several teams that are really, really talented, and they've been pushed. And that is the value in having that sort of schedule in the early part of your schedule. When you face dominant types of teams, I mean, the defense finally looked like the defense that we expected to see throughout the course of this season. It was the defense that we saw week one. And you know what the biggest factor in that is? They were healthy. A lot of the guys on that defense were not playing at 100%. And look, no one's ever going to be at 100% throughout the course of a regular season. It's impossible in any level of football. I don't care if you're talking high school, college, pros, doesn't matter. You're never going to be 100% healthy. But when your best players are banged up in the way that a lot of these Georgia front seven guys have been, and even on Saturday, they weren't at 100%. Small London, he missed this game. And then you have Dan Jackson and others missing the final parts of the fourth quarter with targeting calls, which I don't want to get too deep into officiating. We will at some point because it needs to be addressed, but I don't want to get it not this very second. So Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, those two guys have been dealing with injuries. They've been nicked up over the course of the regular season to this point, but they jump in here. They manhandled this Texas offensive line. I mean, 7 sacks in this game, 10 tackles for loss. They were getting after Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning in this entire rushing attack that they held to 29 yards on the ground. I said on the preview show that we did, Texas has to run the ball effectively. And if they were going to find success in this game, they needed to run the ball well. This isn't the type of game where Quinn Ewers was going to be able to drop back and just throw passes over the middle and just complete it willy-nilly. That was never the way that this game was going to go. They didn't get the support that they needed on the ground. Now, it's just the fact that the inverse happened for Georgia in this game. I called out Trevor Etienne heading into this game. He was the number one person for me on that offense, besides the obvious with Carson Beck, who ended up playing probably one of the worst games of his career in that first half. Trevor Etienne was exactly the guy that Georgia needed in this game. He stepped up. He got tough yards. It's only 87, but those were 87 tough yards. He also gets into the end zone 3 times. I mean, look.
Yeah, I just want to
really
jump
good.
in real quick and just back you up on this. The impact is more impressive than the numbers will display for ETN. I think that's what you have to look at, because the box score is not going to make you open your eyes like too crazy outside of the touchdown total. The impact on that game, however, was massive.
Yeah, there was instances where it was like 3rd and 6 or something, and they felt comfortable turning around and handing off. It was like a 4-down scenario where you're probably going to go for it on 4th down. But you turn around and hand it to Trevor Etienne, and he takes it the distance, and he gets all of it on one play. And the dude, he ran tough. He ran behind his pads, and it was one of those types of performances that won them this football game. It was critical, especially on a day where Carson Beck doesn't get to the 200-yard mark. He throws 3 interceptions. Granted, I don't think all of those were necessarily his fault, like you mentioned, but it was a complete team performance on everybody except for the person we thought had to have a perfect day. And that's just the personification of college football. Defense does that, though. Like, if Georgia's defense continues to play at that level, I'll agree with you. I don't think there's a team in America that can beat them. If they're playing at that level and that offense played that poorly, they only go for 110 on the ground. Like, they didn't do a whole heck of a lot on offense. It's just the fact that they really held Texas to 7 or 8 points, really. They had one successful drive throughout the course of this game. The other one was set up off of the interception that came down to about the 10-yard line. So if you play at that level, I don't care if you're Oregon, Ohio State, anybody, you are not beating this team, because I don't expect that offense to play that up and down throughout the course of the rest of the regular season or into the playoffs. But if the defense travels like that, they're going to be a damn near impossible out for anybody in America. But this does get me into this next point, and I think we need to discuss it quickly. The Texas fans throwing trash and everything out, beer bottles and everything else, not bottles, but beer cans out onto the field. It was an inexcusable action from the Texas fans. It was an awful sight. It was bad. Look, the pass interference call was bad. It was the incorrect call. It was also the incorrect call for the officiating crew to sit through this wait and sit through this period of when they suspend action for cleaning up the fans' debris and everything else that's coming out onto the field. And then for them to come out and reverse the call it's interesting. It's very interesting. And it's unprecedented. I've never seen something like that in college football ever at any point. And it does call into question. Look, the call I feel like was incorrect. I mean, Kirby said the wrong guy was called or whatever. The original call. Kirby says it was happening in a different spot. I need to go look at the actual play and see if there's another piece of holding or pass interference at some other spot that he was calling for. But whatever they were showing on the replay was not a defensive pass interference. I get that fact, and I agree with that. But to go in to administer the foul and then wait and sit by and then reverse the call, it was inexcusable what the officiating crew did.
So I want to take this from two aspects. Let's start with the fans throwing stuff on the field. I'm not going to crush Texas for this.
Well, it's not on Texas.
No,
it's
I know.
Just
every fan base does that. We've seen Braves fans do that. We've seen fans across any sport.
Tennessee fans did it with the mustard bottle.
So I'm just not going to say anything about Texas. I think it was them in this situation, but they're no different than Tennessee can do it. Ole Miss could do it. Heck, even Georgia fans could do it. You got to have a good arm to get over the hedges, but you know what I'm saying. So fans are going to be fans. Drunk students are going to be drunk students. The school's been fined, and they're going to try and take some steps to punish those who were involved in including banning them from future events. Look, I was watching the Atlanta Falcons game today. They overturned a pass interference call that they had originally called. The difference was it happened in the moment. The difference was they call it, they then get together, huddle up, and then they decide contact was incidental, blah, 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 and they make their move. It wasn't a 3-minute or 4-minute delay, in which case I don't know if the officials got together and talked about it. I don't know if it was buzzed in from the command center in the stadium or potentially the command center from the league office. I don't know exactly what went down. And that's what's a little bit nerve-wracking. If that call we've seen calls get overturned. We've seen the officiating crew get together, discuss things, and change the decision. But it happens in the moment. It happens within the next play. And the problem is if the fans don't throw anything on the field, another play is run, they don't have time to overturn and discuss and do all this, and it doesn't happen. So you've got to figure out the formula and the method that it took for this to be overturned. And if it needs to be addressed, it has to be addressed. Like you said a while ago, it's a good thing it didn't impact this game. In terms of the eventual result, eventual winner. I'm okay with the call. I understand why, if what they showed was what it was overturned, but how they got to the point of overturning it is a problem.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about this in terms of this game, because I do want to get into some of these other games that we did see over the course of the weekend. I just want to punctuate and send home how important this Georgia defense, that performance was for the future prospects of this team. I mean, you look at the efficiency numbers of what Georgia was able to do on third down. So Texas doesn't get a third down conversion until the very end of the third quarter. They were 0 of 9 and then 0 of 10, I think, and then it was like 1 of 11. That's when they finally converted something. And then it's not like they would fail on third down and set up a really successful fourth down play, because Texas was also 1 of 5 on fourth down. This team put together a full, complete effort, and it started with the play of the defense. That's the reason that Georgia won. That's the reason that Georgia is now in the driver's seat of the SEC. I understand you have a couple of teams that have to play each other, but now at this instance, Georgia is in charge, and they showed that the college football world still goes through Athens until further notice. But